What does creativity mean?
Creativity, or I use creative thinking, is the process of problem finding and problem solving with value, relevance, and novelty.
How can I become more creative?
The first thing is belief. The other thing is we don't pay attention.
How did you get on a TEDx stage? How did you execute that?
I saw the application come through. A lot of universities host their own TEDx events, and I filled it out. I didn't even know what I was going to talk about, but I was like, creativity and entrepreneurship, what does that look like combined? And I just filled it out and pressed it, and then, you never know what's going to happen. But once that email comes back of you were selected, then you're like, oh man, I got to write a speech,
Today, we are joined by award-winning educator, best-selling author, globally recognized TEDx speaker. Very excited to speak today with the founder of cafestrategies.com, Genein Letford. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Genein, the pleasure is all mine, and you've got a great story. I love what you're building over there. It's all about creativity and education. But I want to kind of go back into time to your beginning days of entrepreneurship, because you actually started out as a teacher, right? So walk us through going from being a teacher in the traditional classroom to your teaching now digitally. Walk us through that.
Well, once a teacher, always a teacher. So I still am a teacher. I said I left the classroom, just opened my walls. But I went to school, got my credential, thought I'd do 30 years in the classroom, retire, get the gold watch, the whole thing, and the pension. We'll see if that's still there. But just, that feeling in your heart of, I think I'm meant to do this other thing. And so even before I left, because I officially left the classroom in June of 2019, I was so, a pivotal moment hit, 2008, and that's when the stock market crashed and, the whole bubble burst. And I just moved from third grade into the music position. And with your family being in education, the first thing to go is the music and PE, right? If they got to cut budgets, it's the arts and the PE. So something in the back of my mind said, I have to start building something that's mine, that belongs to me, that no one can take from me. And I'm so glad I had that mindset, because that's when I started looking at my creative aspects and looking at how I could leverage it. I started looking at my story in a branding type of way, and I didn't really go through entrepreneurship training. So this was just a part of my personality. I started applying for more awards to add that credibility to my name. So these things started happening organically.
And when was this happening? This is happening, you're saying, around 2009?
2008.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm 3 years into my career, but because of that switch, I knew that my school could let me go at any time. So I had to start positioning myself as being just a normal educator, which educators rock. But if I'm in a pool of other educators looking for other employment, how could I stand apart? And so that's where that entrepreneurial creativity mindset really started to take hold.
Super, super smart, and kind of similar to my story in that we're living in the world of COVID-19 and mass transformation of jobs. And I mean, we don't know what jobs are going to be here or not going to be here in the next 5 to 10 years. So I absolutely love the idea of branching out and essentially side hustling and building up your online resume. So you've kind of identified, Genein, that you need to be doing, or at least expanding your knowledge base, make yourself more marketable. What was the first project you started? How did you start branching out from just that sole in-classroom education?
Well, the gem, and I'm the diamond person, so that's my metaphorical message. The first gem that really arose was when we had an award-winning author visit our school. Her name is Catherine Applegate, and since you have kids, you might know the story of the one and only Ivan. Did you see any commercials about that? It's on Disney Plus. It was supposed to go in theaters, but because of everything that happened, it didn't. But this award-winning national global authors coming to our school, I knew that I didn't want it to be just a normal visit. So I created something called FITA, Finding Ivan Through the Arts. And that is really the impetus of what the work that I'm doing today with employees and companies. How do I get the kids to think creatively? Because creativity is a cognitive skill. It's not like you're born with it and you're not. Oh well. But I really added these creative thinking components to the curriculum so they can develop something new in order to almost surprise her when she came to visit. And she said, maybe I shouldn't say this on air, but she said that she's visited thousands of schools, many schools, and she remembers our visit the most
Wow.
because of what I and the kids created. They basically gave the story back to her. So that was the pivotal moment of what does it look like to add, associative thinking, metaphorical thinking, multiple perspectives, and just all these elements. And now I did it for kids, and now I do it for adults, getting them back to their childlike creative thinking abilities.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I think that, like you said, Jadid, you really want to take advantage of every opportunity that you have. And when an award-winning speaker comes to your, or award-winning author speaker comes to your location, how can you provide value to them? How can you stand out? So I think that's really smart that you kind of led the charge on that. So was there a particular moment when you just took the leap into leaving that steady salary into, this authorship and the speaking and this educational business?
Sure, and it is a leap because my husband is an entrepreneur. He runs his own media company, and so I'm the one, as you know, carrying the health insurance. I'm the one carrying the steady, get paid on the first and the 15th type of job. So it was even more of a bigger risk for me to leap than him at the time. And it comes to the point where I tell people, just don't wake up and just leave your job.
Yeah.
This was something brewing in my spirit for a while. And I just remember having that conversation with the director of one of my boards. I was like, I think this is the last year, meaning I would not eat. And it's hard with education because my whole job is around giving and having compassion and empowering the next generation. It's not like I'm putting paper in one pile to the next for
Yeah.
8 hours. That would have been easier to leave. But had I stayed another year, I knew I would have been in the wrong place. And if you really want to look at a creative life, and creativity is about, the courage and the awareness and being observant about your surroundings. A creative life is a life of movement. Not saying you're leaving every job every year, but you're growing in some type of way. The studies of growth mindset, fixed mindset, and all that good stuff. But there's some growth and there's movement. And so for me to stay there when I know I'm not supposed to be there because of this gem that I had burning inside of me to offer the world, I would have done myself a disservice and the world a disservice as well.
So being true to yourself, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with being in that traditional education system or being that 9 to 5 employee. Nothing wrong with that, right? But man,
but there's growth there. There's still growth wherever you are.
Sure.
There's something you're doing new in that same position.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with that because stagnancy is extremely depressing when you're stagnant and dangerous too. You could get fired. Like if you're in the hospitality industry right now, like what do you do? If you know hospitality, you're in big trouble. Hey, Mark here. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Let YouTube know you're enjoying this video. Let me know you're enjoying this video. All right, let's get back into this episode. So you hit on a couple really interesting points here. And I'm also curious, do you think by having a husband that was an entrepreneur, it made it easier for you to make the leap, or to make it harder because he was already kind of dealing with the unknown of entrepreneurship?
It's made it harder. Had he had a steady income job, had he been a teacher and I was like, I feel like I want to do this thing, it would have made it easier because that safety net is there. Yeah. And so, and we're a couple from faith. So we come from a faith-based perspective as well. So, but yeah, I just had to jump because I don't want to be on my deathbed saying, I wonder what would have happened had I jumped and taken the leap.
Yeah, that's really powerful. My grandfather actually passed away a few weeks ago. He's in his 90s, and I remember a couple of years ago, he walked me through his old scrapbook and he's going through page after page after page of his scrapbook. And I kind of realized that I'm going to be doing this one day with my grandkids. And what do I want my scrapbook to look like? And I think it's the best homage I can pay to him is to make sure that I have a great scrapbook that I feel happy with and my grandkids can be inspired with. So yeah, 100%. Like, time is limited. So act now, right? So when you took that leap, I'm kind of curious, did you already have an infrastructure, a network? Did you have clients or what? Like, talk to me about that a little bit.
So I would have liked more, sometimes I hear people saying, I left my full-time job when my side hustle was making just as amount as my full-time job. Yeah. And that was totally a beautiful place to be in. And some, people are at different points. For me, the credibility was there.
Yeah.
And like the TEDx came through 2 years before I left. Medtronics called me to do some training, so things were there, and the network was there. That's a huge thing. I feel we're doing our kids a disservice service by just giving them the academics and not telling them there's these other crucial
Yeah.
components to really having a life well lived. Of course, creativity is a big part of that, but building a solid network. And I joined a board called donorschoose.org. Your wife may know about it, being in education, but he asked me to join the board 6 years ago. The CEO of LinkedIn is on the board. The senior vice president of Facebook is on the board. The top female investor, Teresa Gao, is on the board. So I didn't even know what I was walking into, but understanding what network capital is,
Yeah.
and knowing you have a message worth sharing and people are interested in, definitely make sure those foundations are set. The money will come because the business I'm in, I can get a client tomorrow and just take care of what I was making for 3 months. I know people who speak and get in a check what I get in a check for 6 months of work. So it's there, but certain infrastructures do have to be built, and then your network and your message is definitely one of them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, that's to me one of the biggest values you get from doing events like this video podcast. Well, you're just building your network and giving value, and it's just a really good way to build your resume. I want to talk a little bit before we get into the nuts and bolts of creativity and why that is so important. I just want to talk a little bit about getting on a TEDx stage. How did you get on a TEDx stage? How did you execute that?
Well, once again, I said I come from a faith background, so lots of prayer. But it's just, once again, one huge. I have the 16 diamond tools of creativity, but one of them is being open to experiences, and the Harvard Business Review found that stat as well. People who are open to new experiences, and you may not know it, and you might pick it up now. I come from a background of speech impediment. I had speech therapy all of my life, and I stutter, still do. It's something that I work through. But knowing that my message was so important that I had to overcome that, I saw the application come through. A lot of universities host their own TEDx events, and I filled it out. I didn't even know what I was going to talk about, but I was like, creativity and entrepreneurship. What does that look like combined? And I just filled it out and pressed it. And then, you never know what's going to happen. But once that email comes back of you were selected, then you're like, oh man, I got to write a speech, but you just go with that. And people who want to live a truly creative life have to understand that sometimes you got to put yourself out there. And when the opportunity arises, you got to go for it, because it could be, there's no warning sign on greatness. There's no one that says this one event is going to change the trajectory of your life. We don't know that beforehand. But if you don't go and try it, you'll never know at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really interesting. And again, I think this is kind of a common theme here. You probably wouldn't have had a chance of getting on that TEDx stage if you hadn't put the infrastructure in place and the network and these connections and awards before that, right? It legitimizes you. And that, I think it's really easy when you're starting off to be overwhelmed by, oh, I'll never get this. I'll never get this. Just keep taking those steps forward, those baby steps forward. Love that. So we're talking again, we're here with Genein Letford from cafestrategies.com. And so I want to get into creativity a bit. Okay. I'm looking at the website. We've got creativity everywhere. So let's talk about, and I think there's a stat that Fortune 500 companies are valuing creativity above and beyond almost every other skill. Define creativity for me. Does this mean I'm great at painting or great at making music? What does creativity mean?
And that's this huge, massive just task that I have to overcome. Creativity, the word has been kind of hijacked by the arts. And so what I'm saying is, number one, I have to redefine the term creativity, or I use creative thinking, is the process of problem finding and problem solving with value, relevance, and novelty. Meaning people who are and I studied highly creative thinkers, they're good at they're finding problems, things, they're observant, they're seeing what's going on, and they're connecting, and they're solving problems. Now, because creativity, the word has been hijacked by artistry, I don't want to disclaim artistry. I have my background in music. It is impossible to fully reach your full creative potential, which is problem solving, I believe, without some type of training in the arts, because artistry gives you these extra muscles that are directly tied to creative thinking. increased perspective, emotional intelligence. That's been a huge buzz in the past, what, five years now. Just your ability to switch frames, pattern recognition, pattern forming. If you're a musician or a dancer, you understand it's basically built upon patterns of silence and sound. And so, yes, you need artistry to fully develop your creative thinking, but creative thinking isn't solely artistry. There's science, there's business, creativity, and entrepreneurship. To me, are synonymous.
Yeah. 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 Well, I mean, if we're going by the definition of finding and solving problems, that is definitely what entrepreneurship is all about, and entrepreneurship to an extent. So I look, I'm all on board with how important this is, but this is a really hard thing to quantify, right? It's hard to quantify how creative am I and what are some creative things that I've done. So walk me through a little bit. How can I become more creative? How can I search out these problems? Are there any common denominators that you're seeing in creative people?
Sure. And one of the way that they show up is we study highly creative folks. And well, the one thing that they can do is go to the website and download the 16 tools, and I lay it out clearly there. The first thing is belief. With the whole growth mindset theory coming out and my background in psychology, I really start with people with their belief systems. Because if you're saying out loud that you're not creative or you never do anything, creative within your fields, your brain is shutting down. When
Mm,
you're at the ideation sessions, you're not going to really take that leap. So I deal with mindset first during my trainings, and that's some serious work because you're dismantling belief systems that have been up since childhood. And that's some work right there. Most of your belief systems are solidified by 12 years old. Those are the formative years. So we look at that work. The other thing is we don't pay attention, especially with our phones and technologies,
yeah.
And so your creativity is based upon your ability to connect and reconnect and lay out knowledge. But if you're missing 60% of what's going on around you, what does that look like? So in my trainings, we get back out into nature. We look at a flower. When's the last time you really looked at a flower? It takes time to see. And the word observe, people normally think it's dealing with sight, but the word observe, it means to attend to. So what are you giving your attention to? And you have your five senses. You have your emotional senses, your spiritual senses, and also your creative senses. So a lot of these have been shut down because of culture, because of systems. Sadly to say, I love school, but sometimes we do strip the creative thinking
Yeah.
skills from the kids. So we have to be more mindful of that. And this is the perfect time to do that shift within our within our school systems, as well as within our workforce.
Well, I think a lot of people recognize that there's some problems with modern day education. To me, it seems like it's designed to help you pass a test rather than find those problems, think of interesting ways to resolve them. Um, I speak to a local high school occasionally. It's more of an underprivileged high school about finance, and it's shocking to me how little these kids actually understand. I've done two classes. I'm going to actually recording recording for the entire senior class now. In the 60 to 65 kids I've spoken to, not one single kid knew what a credit rating was. And I'm like, it impacts every single part of your life. Everything from your car insurance to getting a credit card to getting venture capital. Like it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy.
And to me, that is a form of injustice, and that's why CAFE actually stands for Creative Advancement for Financial Empowerment,
Mm,
because your creative health affects your financial wealth, and that's what I do. My first book is actually on financial education and how I came out of $100,000 worth of debt on a teacher's salary because I had no financial education with a UCLA degree. So,
wow.
what does it mean to be educated is the question that I'm asking, and you observed firsthand of the malpractice that
It's
we're
absurd.
engaged in by high school. You should at least know the basics, and financial education and creative education starts as early. You start with your 4-year-old. What's a want? What's a need?
Yeah.
And then it just goes on from there. So that's another shift that I see our systems needing to go through.
Well, and I think it's just naturally going to happen, I think, as well, because of the way that I think people are less reliant or believing less in the concept of go to college, get a degree, get the 9 to 5 corporate job, buy a house and retire. More people are like, hey, I can make money on YouTube, or I can be a Twitch streamer, or I can make music. I could do so. There's so many different ways to make money if you can get into that mind, that creativity mindset. How am I going to solve a problem that someone has? And it's tough. It's not
Yes,
easy. I mean,
yes.
you just mentioned. I'm kind of curious about this. You unfortunately had a bunch of student loan debt, major problem that people suffer from. So I think a trap that people can fall into is the only way to pay off my student loan debt is to work in that major and that job. How did you actually use your creative knowledge to dig yourself out of that hole?
Yes, and I put a whole chapter just about that. Your creative health affects your financial wealth because we're on, as some of your audience members may know, if you're an educator, you're on a grid. And the grid goes, it's XY coordinate grid, and you get a raise, hopefully, if you do, by how many years you're in school and how many units you have. So it's not like the corporate world where you can get a bonus over here, or a sales world where you're off commission and your income can skyrocket. It's pretty much set.
Yeah.
And so, because of that, you're right, I had those limitations. I had to think creatively. And that's the work that I do with a lot of my mentees with my nonprofit, Alumni 360, is I tell them to really reflect introspectively. Where are my gifts? I call them diamonds. Where are my diamonds? How can I buff them off? Because, diamonds are found in rock form. How can I buff them off, cut them well, and present them to the world? And there's your entrepreneurship connection. And once again, I think it's an injustice that we don't teach our kids money and teach our kids the entrepreneurial mindset. I'm not saying everyone needs to be a full-time entrepreneur, but everyone should have access to learning the mindset of an entrepreneur. And that's what I had to do. I started doing photography. I did baptisms and videos of shows. I realized that my teaching practice was one of a kind, so I started submitting those for awards. And Hilton gave me $9,000 and sent me to Japan. I won $10,000 with a teaching award. So I really started to leverage, what am I good at? How can I, hone in my story, be a good storyteller? As an entrepreneur, we have to be great storytellers, and then ship it out. A lot of us don't want to share out with what we're doing, and no one can help you if they don't know what you're doing. So once I really factored that in and shined up my diamonds and then started to share my diamonds, the debt was just, and of course, hard work and making sure the money was going where it needed to be, and the debt snowball, all that stuff. The math was there, but the creativity aspect made it go way faster. And that's in the book, From Debt to Destiny, Creating Financial Freedom from the Inside Out. That's the title of my book, explaining how I did it.
Well, I mean, I really love this concept of buffing out the diamond, right? Because I'm with you, Gene. I definitely believe that everyone has that gem inside of them, or multiple gems inside of them. The problem is, if you're stuck in that complacency, all you see is the coal in the stone, the dirt over it. You can't actually see the diamond until you start getting in and doing the work, and that takes time. It's not always apparent. But I think that everyone has that great system. I love that. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about your knowledge in traditional education and how that's allowed you to become such an effective course builder now, right? Because over at the cafestrategies.com, that's CAFFE, cafestrategies.com, you've got several courses there to help people bring out this creativity and leverage that to success. So how is this different from what we're learning in school? And what have you taken from your traditional education and applied? What have you evolved?
Sure. Well, because I'm a teacher and I know curriculum development and pedagogy, I've taken those skills. But because I'm an artistic teacher as well, and I have my background in music, I'm married to he's not a professional dancer by trade, but he's done professional dance, and and I taught at CSUN, our local university, California State Northridge, how to bring arts into the classroom. I'm basically combining all that because I know people truly learn and internalize something and then switch it into a behavior when it's experiential learning. They are all in. It's not just you sitting listening to a lecture for 2 hours. So it's really taking all of those elements that I did with my 5-year-olds and bringing it up to my 35-year-olds. And of course, the The content is a little bit more advanced, but the delivery is the same. You're moving, you're interacting, you're creating, and you're reflecting upon what you're learning, and you have these actionable steps to actually implement it so it becomes a habit and it becomes a part of your identity. Because in the end, that's what we want, the identity forming to happen.
So I'm kind of curious here. How do you actually make it interactive, right? Because most of the time when I'm thinking a online course, it's me watching a talking head or maybe doing a walkthrough. How do you make it interactive? Because I'm with you. The best way to learn something is to actually start getting in there and getting your hands dirty. How do you actually create that sort of engagement?
Movement and just there's one activity that I do where in order, companies that are led by purpose do well. Purpose driven
Yeah.
companies, the purpose of your mission statement, your values. So I love to use PwC as an example because I've worked with them and they just do some great things. And they have these 4 value statements. And so what I do is, okay, this is, we solve difficult problems. What does that look like as a tableau? A tableau is a frozen scene, you get up with in a group. This is before COVID, and you basically metaphorically show me what that looks like. So the reason why the arts are so critical for your creativity development, even though the word's kind of been hijacked, but it makes you reframe it and communicate the same idea through a different medium. So if I were to say, okay,
Mm.
well, what are three values that you have in your home as a family? Awesome, right? And you might want to do this with your kids. It's kind of fun. Okay, write them out. Okay, and that's all. Normally we stop there, but now show me in a tableau, what does that look like? What does we're kind to one another look like? Okay, show me in a painting. You can either make a painting or find a painting that's already established that communicates that same idea. Now you have to think and you have to defend your position. And your wife may choose a different painting than you. How is that? How do you guys reconcile that? So it's things like that to really get people looking at things in a different way, and that's a huge part of creativity perspective.
I like that's actually a really smart idea. That's not something I've heard before. So just to kind of reiterate that, to kind of regurgitate it, right? If I'm, for example, learning an idea, right, via video or audio, maybe I write it down and then, like you said, maybe paint a painting. Maybe I record my own video. Maybe I record a podcast, right? You're putting it into these different types of mediums of communication, right? Maybe I'm playing on my guitar, right? All these, I mean, heck, maybe I'm drawing in the dirt with sticks like I do with my daughter sometimes. So is that, am I hearing you right? This is going to help you to absorb the information more effectively?
Yes, and a lot of times I have people choose already established pieces of work. So like what I did
Uh,
with my kids, because then you have to see the forced connections. That's the hard part. When you create on a blank canvas, it's a beautiful thing, and I do that as well. But if I say, how does your value of your company match with the value of this particular song? You really have to think hard. And then the beauty of metaphorical work, and that's a big part of my training, is metaphors uncover what you didn't even know you were supposed to be looking for. If you look at some of the top inventions and the biomimicry, how we get information from nature, there's so many lessons and messages in nature that we just don't take the time to uncover. And the next big, iPhone idea is hidden somewhere out there. The cures for all the things we need are all around us. We just need to see these forced connections and look at the messages that are being already told to us.
So let's levy out a challenge to all the after hours entrepreneurs out there, and correct me if you can here. All the after hours entrepreneurs out there, they've got their side hustle, their brand, they've got a vision for their company, right? But let's correlate that with their favorite, with a song, with a movie, with a famous piece of art, right? And with a television show. So that's 4. What's a 5th thing maybe we can correlate our vision of our company with?
A poem if they know
Poem.
poems, or a freestyle. When you freestyle, you shut down the frontal cortex of your brain, which is the one that is used to kind of filter stuff, and the real you comes out. Try that with your 4 year old, and you have to feel about the rhythm. So when you're freestyling about your company, really you get what you really think about it, or find a poem that's already established, and you'll be able to talk about your company with a whole new light, which could be the door to a whole new service or product or a connection.
I love this. This is absolute gold. You might say this is diamond in the rough type stuff here with Genein Letford from cafestrategies.com. I also want to point out that that freestyling is exactly how I came up with the name of this show, The After Hours Entrepreneur. It took, I kid you not, 2 months I was struggling over the name of the show. And I just started freestyling and talking to my wife, and all of a sudden it just came out. I was like, oh.
And it works.
There we go. There we go.
It's
All right,
beautiful.
cool. So we've got a challenge levied out. Of course, you can learn more and go through the coursework with Genein. But before I let you go here, I want to go through a couple rapid fire questions for you. All right.
Sure.
So let's get started here. If you could only have one social media app on your phone, what would you have?
I would have Facebook. Just
Okay.
I think that most people are on it.
Sure. If you had 10 seconds with yourself 10 years ago, what would you say?
Be you, and the frail parts are the beautiful parts.
What is a must-have subscription?
Netflix.
Okay, here at After Hours Entrepreneurs, we give Netflix a lot of flack, but I'll give it to you. There's no
Okay. Yeah, I don't watch it a lot, but that's the only subscription that we have, so that I know of.
If there was only one business task you could do for the day, what would you do?
Use my imagination.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, final question here for you, Genein. If you had a billboard message that could reach millions and millions of people, what would you put on your billboard?
Your creative health affects your financial wealth, so create today.
Genein said it. I agree with it. Genein Letford, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad you enjoyed this episode. I've got several other episodes right here for you. Smash one of these videos to make sure that you don't miss out on the tips, tools, and tactics of industry experts. Let's take that side hustle full time. Smash one of these links.